Thank you so much for joining our Summer of Learning event. We're in the Dealing with the Learning Gap to Fuel Student Success session. To get us started, I would just like to welcome our presenter today, our faculty expert, Dr. Willem Wallinga from Fisher College in Boston. So hi, Willem, and thank you for being here today.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm really excited about sharing this topic with you.
Thank you, Willem, and we'll get to you in just a minute. So before we get started, I also wanted to go through our agenda. But before that, I wanted to let everyone know if we don't get to your questions today, Willem will also be attending our office hour session that we're hosting after this event. And if you do want to join that office hour session and you haven't signed up yet, simply go back to your summary email that you received this morning to adjust your registration schedule and sign up for the session, and you'll get the link in order to access it today. So our agenda today is I'm just going to give you a real brief overview of some of the resources outside of your normal course content to help address readiness gaps. And then I'm going to turn it over to Willem to talk about his advanced module design to build self-sufficient learners. And then he's going to take you into WebAssign to show you exactly what he does in order to build those modules. Now, we wanted to ask you just a quick question to see how you are feeling about going into the fall semester and around this question. Because course readiness is always an issue. We know that. It's not something that we've not heard from before, but we're just curious to see you know, if this is more of an issue than it's been in the past, a little bit more, or if you think it's going to be about the same. So we'll just give you a few more seconds to answer the question to see how folks are feeling. Still getting a couple answers in. All right, I think it looks like it's answers settled down. So it looks like over 70% of you feel like it's going to be either somewhat or significantly more than in the past. That's a pretty significant number. So regardless of where you're feeling along that scale, I think that you are at the right session today. We're going to talk with you about all these, all the different ways that you can solution for this need. And hopefully you're going to walk away today with some tips that you can actually utilize in your fall courses to address readiness gaps. So I'm going to start off briefly, as I said, to share with you some of our resources to address readiness gaps that are outside of the normal course material you find in your textbook content. The first thing I wanted to share with you is information about our new free WebAssign boot camps that we've put together over the summer. And we've put together two different options. One for college level math, and you can see the courses that it's really designed to support on the slide. And then we also have a calculus readiness boot camp available too. All of the details around these boot camps and how to assign them can be found on the web page that you see on the slide in front of you. And Shauna is going to be putting the link in the chat as well if you want to go in and just grab that link for later reference. A little bit more about the boot camps is that they are available in the free additional resources, which I'll be telling you a little bit more about here in a moment. They include assessment plus remediation. And basically you have three different ways that you can give access to your students. One will be to create a standalone boot camp section within your account. And then you can email us to make sure that that is a free access account. And the instructions again for doing so are at that web page that is on the slide in front of you. You can also simply integrate it into an existing course that you have already built for any of these course areas. And then the last one is if you don't want to be making a course for this specifically, you can simply email your students directions to access an open access course for any student that they can join in. And any instructor can take advantage of these boot camps if any of your peers are interested in it, because you don't now have to be using WebAssign in order for us to help you set up a free bootcamp course. We definitely just want to help solve the need for students who are feeling not quite ready for their fall courses and to really help them build confidence and come in prepared. The other resource that I would like to talk with you about is our new foundational resources. The first one is the Math Mindset module, and the second one is the College Success module. Both of these provide learners with the opportunities to discuss and improve various soft skills, including study skills, test-taking strategies, and acclimating to college. The Math Mindset modules differ in that they're specific to mathematics courses and include open response journal-type prompts for learners to discuss their own personal connections to the content. They also focus on fostering a growth mindset towards improving these skills, noting that they can always be improved through practice and reflection. Again, all the information on these modules can be found at the web link that you find on the screen, and Shauna, again, will be sharing this in the chat for you to grab if you want to have immediate access to that after the session today to check out. And the last resource that I want to tell you about is a variety of resources, and these are our free additional resources. If you haven't discovered these in the past, if you've been a longtime WebAssign user, we definitely want to make sure that you discover them now. And if you're a new user, this is something that you can take advantage of right from the get-go. We have a wide variety of free resources that we've built up over the years that we make accessible to anyone that's using WebAssign. And for math, they include tutorial banks, readiness assessments, question banks, and then for physics, we have clicker questions, exams, and test prep and test banks. So I did also mention previously that both the boot camps and the College Success modules and the Math Mindset modules can also be found in the free additional resource. So you can find them and add them to your course as you're creating a new course, or if you've already created a course, you're going to see the same similar option available to you. So if you've created a course already, you would go into Edit Course Settings. If you're creating a new course, you would simply find this option here to add textbooks and free additional content as you're selecting your textbook. So after you select that, you would simply go into the list of content that's available to you, highlight using the Shift or the Alt key if you're selecting more than one, and click Save. Once you've added it to your course, there's a couple different ways that you can then access the content. One, in your question browser, as you're building a new assignment, you will either find it in the textbook. Some of them are listed as textbook content, but most of them are listed simply as resource content. So you'll find it here under your My Resources area in that question browser. In addition, the boot camps and the Math Mindset and College Success modules also have pre-built course packs. So that's what we recommend to add them to your course for those resources, is to use those course packs available to you because they have recommended pre-built settings. And then anything once you download any course pack, you can edit it like you as well. But both those options are available to you to add those particular content to your course. So with that, I'm just going to see real quick if there's any questions. Okay, I see from Rob, how do we add content if we already created a course? And I think I covered that, but we can recover. I know Willem will also be digging into this a little bit, or we can include the instructions in the chat as well for you. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Willem. So thank you again, Willem, for being here today. And before you get started, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? How long have you been using WebAssign, and what courses do you use WebAssign for?
Sure. Thanks again, Jen, for the great introduction. I'll be echoing some of that information that she shared during my presentation. I have been using WebAssign since 2012. We use it for all of our math courses at Fisher College, which is in Boston. So I've used it for developmental math, pre-algebra, all the way up to Calculus 2, and all of the courses in between, statistics, finite, college algebra, etc. And we, as I said, we use it for all of our courses at Fisher, so that provides a nice level of consistency for our students. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will have points along the way where we can answer those questions. But for now, I'm going to get started with my presentation. The topic for this presentation is called Advanced Module Design, and I want to first preview what I mean by advanced module design. You know, I'm a mathematician by trade, and mathematicians find definitions very important because we want to make sure we understand what we're talking about. So I'm using the word module here as sort of a generic placeholder for anything that you might think of as an assignment. I didn't want to use the word assignment because the things I'm going to be showing you today are much more flexible than that, but you can think of this as a module as a homework assignment. But other things, other versions are, for example, lab sets, either in the lab or from home, review problem sets, self-guided practice, or even things like summative assessments like tests. And then I also include your own projects. The sky's the limit as long as you consider this type of design and how it best fits your students. From a general standpoint, I'm going to give you sort of a flow chart about how this works, but then we're going to dive very deep, as deep as we can in a half-hour presentation on how I envision this type of module design. Everything starts with a learning objective. So all of our courses have learning objectives, and that's going to be our starting point for designing this one particular module. So for example, here's an example of a learning objective. Recognize and apply common techniques for factoring algebraic expressions. All right, so that's our starting point. With that as our objective, we, as the instructors, we want to select topics within the scope of that learning objective, the scope being sort of defined by the course itself or the students that we're working with. So for example, topics within the particular one that I listed would be greatest common factor, difference of squares, trinomials, grouping. You might also have things like sums and differences of cubes, and other types of factoring techniques, depending on the scope of your course. And then once we've decided on our learning objective and our course content, we want to then move to the completed module. And in this case, we're going to select questions from a variety of sources. And I'll show you what I mean by this during my presentation momentarily. And when we select those questions, we're going to do this in a way so that the learning is scaffolded. And this is how we're going to address those knowledge gaps, those learning gaps. And we also get some nice side benefits along the way that I'll talk about as we get into it. So this is the basic flow chart. My presentation is going to cover scaffolding at 3 different levels. We're going to talk first about the question level, so individual single questions. Then we're going to move to the module level, the assignment level. And then finally, I'll finish by talking about how you can do this at a course level. And this is where, again, I'll talk about some of those course packs and other materials that are available that Jen talked about. So with that, I'm going to move on to the demo portion of this. So bear with me. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is the main page in WebAssign. And what you see here, actually, these are just kind of sandbox courses that I've created. One of them is an actual course that I ran a couple semesters ago, but these are all basically just sandbox courses where I play around with different tools and materials and kind of prepare things for my courses that I don't necessarily want my students to see right away. Most of what we're going to be seeing today will be from the student view. So I'm going to pull that up here. All right, so this is the student view, and we're going to start with college algebra. So I've got a number of different examples from a wide variety of courses here to present to you. I didn't want to harp on one topic more than the others, but most of the topics I'm talking about today are pre-calculus and would probably fall into a developmental level class, or at least a pre-college algebra class. But let's start with everybody's favorite, which is word problems. So when we think about word problems, we know that students really don't like word problems, for lack of a better phrase. And a lot of that has to do with how they're presented. So if you look at this sample of 3 questions that I have here, these are 3 word problems that all require linear equations to solve. And you can see that there's really no scaffolding built in whatsoever. All you see here is that there's a question that's being asked and then an answer blank. There's no learning tools. There's no steps involved. It's just question and answer. So if you're around my age, you probably remember doing questions like this out of a textbook when you were in high school and college, right? Here's a question, answer it. Students nowadays who read questions like this often get discouraged. They don't even really know how to do these types of problems. And when they see that there's no learning tools for them, they often just skip the problem entirely, or they try to find a separate way of answering it without actually doing the work. So at the question level, one thing we're going to try to promote in this presentation is this idea of scaffolding. And there's a number of different ways we can do this. I'm going to show you one way right now, but I'm going to get into some other examples later on. So this is not just the only way. Here are those same 3 questions, but they're presented a little bit differently, okay? You can see that there's no answer blank. What there is a link to click to begin, right? So for example, in the first example here with a taxi cab company figuring out the how many miles it was based on the dollar amounts, the first thing this is going to do when the student clicks on this is it's actually going to talk to them about the structure of the problem. So instead of just diving right in and trying to find the solution, we're going to talk about, well, what does it mean to calculate the cost of the trip? We define what our variable means. We try to figure out how that variable is attached to the 2 pieces of information, which is the flat fee and then the cost per mile, and how that then incorporates itself to create the cost of the trip. So this immediately gets the student thinking from a conceptual point of view rather than just diving in and figuring out how to solve this. So we're going to pick the first one here and submit that, right? Because it's the flat fee plus the cost per mile times the number of miles. And now it brings us on to the next step, which is constructing the equation. So taking the answer from the previous step and using that to build an equation with the known information, and so on and so forth. So it takes the students through step by step. This is really going to help them close those gaps and encourage them to solve the problem even if they're not really sure how to start it, because the problem helps them get started. Another thing it does, and this is one of the side benefits, is it reintroduces them to fundamental vocabulary, right? So a lot of developmental math is loaded with vocabulary, and the way that the questions were asked earlier really had nothing, didn't introduce that vocabulary at all. But in these types of problems, it will remind the student, for example here, it talks about, what labor hours are, what the flat, the set cost or the flat fee is. It reminds them what it means to define a variable, which is something that our students rarely do when they're solving application problems. And as many of you know, that's usually the first thing they should be doing, is identifying the thing that they're solving for. So these questions here, and I'll show you where they come from in a little while, these come from that built-in tutorial bank that Jennifer was talking about earlier, that is provided free of charge from WebAssign. But there are some other options available to you as well. And to show those, I'm going to go over to my developmental math course and talk about a similar topic. Factoring, right? Everybody's favorite. Here's an example of 3 problems where there's absolutely no scaffolding built in. Again, it's just factor, question, answer blank. No guidance, no steps. It's just very generic, and the problems are all basically the same. This is not the type of module design that you want to use if you are hoping to, first of all, engage your students, but more importantly, get them to be sort of self-guided and you know, willing to try the problems on their own. This second example with scaffolding, this shows a little bit of the variety. So the first one is very similar to what I already showed you, which is the tutorial type. So I'm going to skip that because I already showed you a couple examples in the previous set. Here's one here where there's a tutorial and there's also a video. So a lot of the problems in the books come with videos. This one does not come from the WebAssign tutorial bank. This one comes from an Alfman textbook. And if the student wanted to see a similar version of this problem, they could watch this video. Well, I forgot to turn my Java script on. Bear with me for a second. I'll get that set up so that we can show that video. All right, let's try that again. There we go. So here's an example of
factor x squared plus 21x plus 38.
The embedded video, and somebody is solving a similar problem. It is not the same problem, it's similar.
And now we need factors.
Has the same structure.
21, and we know that.
Okay, and I found that my students really enjoy those videos. When we had lab classes in past semesters, they did a good job watching those as often as possible. And then here's an example where I've made the tutorial optional. So the tutorial shows up as a master it, and the students can access that, but it's optional, it's not required. It's not like these first ones where the tutorial was mandatory. And again, I'll show you where to find these problems momentarily. Just one last sort of side benefit. One of the nice things about this method is it offers you, in addition to guidance and helping students and encouraging them, it also gives you a little bit of academic integrity confidence. So for example, you know, some topics like operations with fractions, this is just a very pre-algebra topic. If you put your questions like this on the screen, the students can use technology or, you know, any sort of form of, you know, Googling or whatever to just find these answers without doing the work because there's no structure involved. On the other hand, if we use those tutorial questions, the same problem sort of forces them to go through the steps. So instead of just doing the problem and getting the answer, it reminds them of things like, okay, what is the greatest common factor? How can we figure that out? All right, and then how does that contribute to our problem? So it requires the students to go through the steps. So it adds a little bit of academic integrity, as I said, okay? Before we move on to the modules section, I do want to show you where some of these are located. Whenever you create an assignment in the assignment editor, go to the question browser here. So here are all the textbooks that I have, and below that this is one of the tutorial banks. This is one of the many tutorial banks that Jennifer mentioned earlier. This is one of my favorite ones, this Introductory and Intermediate Algebra, because it has 21 chapters, everything ranging from pre-algebra arithmetic all the way up to pre-calculus concepts like transcendental functions, conic sections, and so on. All of the questions in these tutorial banks come in two versions, right? So for example, if I go to the factoring one, I'll just show you from the beginning here. So every single question has two versions. So this first version, the tutorial is optional. And the second version, the tutorial is mandatory. So again, you have that flexibility as the instructor to decide which type you want. These choices are also available in many of the textbooks. Here's the Alfman textbook that I was using. If I go into 8.1, which is common factors, here's an example here All right, so you can see that this is question 16, right? And it has this MI suffix. And this is also question 16, and this one has an MISA suffix. So what do those mean? So MI means master it, and that's the example I showed you earlier where the tutorial is optional. So if you chose this question with the MI, the tutorial would be optional as a button for the student to click on. If, on the other hand, you chose this MISA, then you would be requiring the tutorial, okay? And these questions are scattered throughout the text. I'll switch from the full view to the micro view just to show you here. This is just that one particular chapter. So you can see here, here's all of the questions, and all of the ones that say MI are those masterites, and they are always immediately followed by an MISA, which is the standalone. I showed you the tutorial bank. And then just one last thing I wanted to show you is these CC problems. This is something I discovered recently because it was added recently. I used these a lot after the transition in March to online learning. Questions like this here, and it only shows the first part, but each of these actually has 3 parts to it. Each of these questions has a video that the students can watch, and then they solve a problem. So again, this is, you know, for all those visual learners out there, if they don't like reading text, or they have, you know, difficulty when that is presented to them, you can also have these visual problems with videos as an option as well. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask Jennifer if there's any questions I can answer, and then I'll move on to the modules.
Yes, we do have a question I want to pose to you regarding, do you ever assign the questions without the tutorial format in them?
Yeah, and
how do you build the scaffolding throughout the assignment?
Well, great. So that's exactly what I'm going to go to next. So I think the best thing I can do is kind of let the presentation answer that question for you. But I will say that it depends on the type of assignment. You know, how much guidance are you interested in giving, or do you want to give? But also, what can your students handle? You know, you know your students better than I do, and so the short answer is yes, absolutely. I use those all the time, and I'll try to show you how I incorporate those at the module level. So now we're going from just looking at questions. We're going to move up to entire assignments. Now, to keep things simple, I'm just going to be looking at a small sampling of questions. So you can kind of think of this as being part of a larger assignment. So think about that as we're going through. Okay, so I'm going to open the student view again. And this time, to switch topics again, I'm going to go over to finite math. So this time we're thinking about this concept of matrix equation, so solving an equation that's built of matrices, or basically systems of equations. Again, when you think about what this could look like without scaffolding built in, you've seen it before. Now, in this case, the student is provided a video in the first example and has the masterites for the second and third question. So there is some assistance there. But what's missing is an evolution. We want to be able to go from the first time the student sees the concept where it's heavily scaffolded to the second or third time the student sees that topic, we start to remove that scaffolding. So the responsibility, it goes from being very shared and instructor driven to being on the student. So this type of problem set here, where there's 3 basically similar problems, there's really no evolution in that set. So this type of, let's take those same 3 problems and take a look at how I could scaffold this within an assignment. So maybe there would be some earlier questions on this homework assignment, talking about finding inverse matrices, okay? So now we get to the point where we're actually solving this matrix equation. So notice the first time they see this, look at all of the structure that's built into this problem. You know, all they're doing in this first step is rewriting the equation from the algebraic form to the matrix form. Then they're finding the inverse, and then they're told this is how to solve the matrix equation. So all of the steps are there. It's all provided for them in sort of one view, and there's a lot of assistance provided. Then when they move on to the second question, there's a little bit less, right? So there's sort of an understanding that they've seen this once now, so you know, maybe they don't need the entire first step, okay? Or the entire middle step, in this case, finding the inverses. But we still provide them a video in case they haven't quite got it, just to provide that extra step of support if they need it. And then finally, here's the third question. And notice that with the third question, there's really no scaffolding. You just have that question and answer piece. I have provided an optional tutorial if they still need a little bit of assistance. But I've also, I want them to show their work on this one. And my thinking is that I've given them 2 questions which have shown them the process in detail. And now I would like to see their version of the process. So I would like them to type in their work, or they can write it down on paper and upload a picture, which is what a lot of my students do, which is fine. So that's one way to do that within an assignment. I want to show you a couple other topics and then move on to the end here. I wish I had more time to talk to you today, but because this is such an exciting topic that I sometimes I go on and on about it. Calculus, the one topic we haven't talked about today. Teaching definition of derivative, for example. I've left out the no scaffolding, but you know, because by this point you understand what I mean by no scaffolding. So here's an example of how I might fit this into an assignment, sort of a 3-question process that's in an assignment. So the first time that they're asked to find the derivative using the definition, it's as a required tutorial. So they will click to begin, and this will take them through the process of calculating the difference quotient and finding the derivative by hand. Okay, so there's no shortcuts here. They have to go through the process. Then in the second example, it's boiled down a little bit, simplified. Again, there's a video provided, but they still have to go through the steps, a little bit easier. And then here we go again. The third step is, okay, good. Now you've seen the process a couple times. Now show us how you find the derivative. And again, here I'm asking them to show their work. This type of idea, you've seen it now at a number of different levels and a number of different courses. I mean, the sky's the limit. I even picked McLaurin series, which is like a Calculus 2 topic, to show that you can do it here, where you have a tutorial question. This one I took from Stewart Calculus, which I'll talk about later, and then a little bit more guidance, and then show your work. So that's sort of the idea, is early on when a student sees the topic for the first time, you want to make sure that they have that support and guidance along the way. But as you progress through the module, you want to take that support away piece by piece so that eventually you reach a point where the student is responsible for not only solving the problem independently, but if necessary, demonstrating the work that they used to do so. I'm going to stop the module presentation here because we're a little bit behind time, but I want to ask Jennifer if we have any more questions at this point.
We're trying to keep up in chat with the questions that are coming up, but I'm going to keep in mind any questions that we have time for at the end. So why don't you go ahead and keep going? Okay,
great. Yeah, I know, like I said, I could talk all day about this. So let's move. We've talked about questions and we've talked about modules. Now let's talk about how you could do this from an entire course perspective. And again, what I show you here is just 1 or 2 examples, but the sky's the limit. I mean, I saw one question in the chat earlier about, you know, how can we design our course if it's already set up? Believe me, you have There's really no limitations. You can play around with this. You can make changes. You can set it up the way that you need to set it up, either by selecting and not selecting the pieces that you want, or by choosing some of the preloaded materials that are available to you. So what I want to show you here is one example of a course that I ran a couple years ago. Here it is. And I'm showing you basically the entire course. So the students wouldn't see this all at the same time, but I put it all up so that you would see the entire thing. This was a classroom face-to-face course, and so in addition to the assessments that you see here, we also had classroom tests. We had a project or two, and we had like class participation. But this was the online material that they had. So I set it up using sort of a three-step process. So each week, they had a preview assignment. This preview assignment was due before we met. And it covered basic topics, definitions. I would pull topics from earlier in the book. So, you know, things like identifying a constant term, identifying the coefficient. So reminding them about what the vocabulary was. What is a like term? What does it mean to simplify? And all of these were selected from the tutorial bank. So if the student needed that review from the tutorial, they could do it, but it was optional. I didn't want to force it upon them. And so that was there before the class even met. Then I give them a practice set. This is effectively their homework for the week. And this is where I would build in that scaffolding. So again, first time they see a problem, require a tutorial. Second time, maybe there's a video. Here's the horizontal, so this time it's different topics, so require tutorial, tutorial optional. And then every now and then I would throw in a problem where I asked them to show their work, okay? Or where I put it, you know, earlier I saw somebody say, did you ever make the, or the question Jennifer shared earlier was, do you ever use the ones where the tutorial is optional? So question number 9, the tutorial is optional here. You can see it as a master it button. Okay. So that was their problem set, and they had all week to work on that. Then at the end of the week, they had a quiz, and the quiz was on Fridays, and it would open up on Friday, but if they achieved 80% on their practice set, then the quiz opened early. So that was sort of a motivation I used to get them to work through their practice set and to not save it for the last day, because if they got through it earlier in the week, like Wednesday, then they could immediately take their quiz. Otherwise, it wouldn't open until Friday morning. So this one here, I opened up so that you can see what it looks like. It shows here that I achieved an 80% on the practice set, and it also shows that this is a timed assignment. So this particular quiz, all of the quizzes here are timed. They're short. I mean, this is 6 questions, but you can see there's a clock in the upper right. I asked them to show their work on some problems, not all of them, but some of the problems, okay? And so that was just a quick summary of their abilities. But notice there's no buttons here. There's no assistance, there's no videos, there's no tutorials. It's all just assumed that they've kind of learned the material by that point. Okay, so again, this is just one way of doing that. It incorporates that idea of giving them a lot of help in the preview, then having them practice it with tutorials, either mandatory or optional, along with videos, and then finishing off that scaffolding with a quiz at the end of the week, and then a test at the end of the unit in class. You can either design these yourself, like I've done. I wrote all of these assignments myself, or some of the materials that are provided in WebAssign, and I'll finish with this piece here. Some of the books come with course packs. So Jennifer mentioned this earlier. So I'm just going to go to here as an example. So here's, this is an Alfman Journey book. The course packs that are provided, there's 26 of them, which is just, I mean, it's more than you could ever hope to have. Has lecture videos and homeworks that are designed to sort of build to that, learning, individual learning, where it helps break down the topics and build up to the eventual test. Another title that has these is the Stewart Calculus. So that's down here. So the Stewart Calculus is loaded with stuff. It has diagnostic tests. It has review from pre-calculus. This is also built into the book with these things called just-in-time problems, where it will allow students or instructors to easily find problems that cover pre-calculus concepts that are essential for the calculus that's being taught. And then within each of the sections, again, there's pre-lectures, there's homeworks, there's quizzes, there's reviews, there's tests. It's all built in there, and you can add all of them. You can pick and choose which ones you want. And as Jennifer said earlier, you can modify these as well. So it appears that my time is up, so I'm going to head back to the slideshow and kind of wrap up with some final comments, and then I'll turn it back over to Jennifer. So just to kind of summarize, you just watched a presentation on advanced module design. All of this started with the learning objectives, so if you want to do this yourself, I recommend that you find your course description or course outline that has the learning objectives. Use that as your sort of source document. That's going to guide you as you construct these modules, but make sure to personalize it to the learning trajectory of your students. Not all students learn the same. Some need more assistance than others, so provide that flexibility as you go along. Do this with scaffolding. When you're creating a module, whether it's a review or a homework assignment, usually there's a couple big ideas in that assignment, whether it's solving matrix equations or linear applications. Try to hit those big ideas with a scaffolded approach. Start with a lot of hand-holding and a lot of support, and then work your way to that independence to help resolve those knowledge gaps. And again, you can use multiple sources, and when I say multiple sources, I'm talking about sort of multiple question types. Try to avoid that textbook monotony that we grew up with, where every question is the same, every instruction is the same. Use those tutorial banks, use those master it questions, use videos, or write your own problems. And the sky's the limit. You can design a course that your students will be engaged with, and not only that, they'll actually learn the material. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jennifer, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Willem. That was wonderful. Very much appreciate all the information that you shared. I did want to share my screen again. I'm going to answer just a real quick question that came up in the chat. In the interest of time, was how do you assign the 80% restriction to an assignment? And so, oops, I keep switching my screen here. So I just wanted to share that when you are in your class and you go to your class schedule here, which is going to bring you to your assignment list, and you simply click this down arrow here, and it's going to give you several options. And you would click Edit Restrictions, and that's where you can actually set up the conditional release. And do you have any hints that you can share around setting up conditional release, Willem?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad we had this question, because this was something that was on my list of topics, but I skipped it for time. Yeah, this is something that you can use to make sure that students are covering the material that you want them to cover before they move on. But you can also use it as a diagnostic. So maybe instead of giving this as a end of the week quiz, maybe you give it as a quiz at the beginning of the week. And if they do well enough on the quiz, then maybe they don't have to do the review assignment, that sort of thing. You can see also at the top there, there's all sorts of other restrictions you can place. Lockdown browser, the timed assignment, that's where I covered it. IP address, this was something where if you wanted your students doing it from campus, you could lock it down to the IP address of campus so that they couldn't do it from home or do it from their dorm room. So yeah, it's again, it really depends on how you want to set it up, but I think of it as sort of a pacing tool to get them to go the speed that you want them to go. You know, you don't want them getting ahead of the game or going too fast. So this kind of forces them to go through the material that you've presented them, but it also gives them that carrot of knowing if they finish it ahead of time, they get early access to the quiz. So it allows them to self-pace it based on their level of understanding.
Great. And another question that came in is, I know that you can adjust the number of attempts for problems. How do you handle that? One attempt for preview assignment, different for homework? I'm just curious about what's your philosophy on attempts?
So and great question. I do have a philosophy on attempts. My default is 5 attempts. Now, some questions get fewer attempts. So for example, like multiple choice questions, you're not going to get 5 attempts. Usually you get 2 in that case. Sometimes I'll set it up where if they try multiple times on a multiple choice question, it decreases the amount of credit they get every time. So if they get it right the first time, they get full credit. If they get it wrong, they can try a second time for 50% credit. So you can kind of work it way where it gives them as many chances as they need so that they know they got the answer correct, but it decreases the amount of credit since it's just a multiple choice question. But for the short answer questions, I usually do set the limit at either 3 or 5, depending on the level of difficulty. And my reasoning for that is if a student gets an answer wrong 5 times, I want them to stop. I want them to step back from the problem and reach out to me for assistance. I don't want them to drive themselves crazy trying, you know, futilely to guess the answer. I didn't show it to you earlier, but in the upper right-hand corner of every single problem, there's a button that says Ask Your Teacher, and that's a great way that students can send messages to their teacher inside WebAssign about specific questions. That I love using that system because it allows me to address the specific problem that the student's working on instead of answering a generic email. So yeah, I think it's good to place limitations on the number of student answers, but once they reach that limit, as long as they reach out to me and ask for assistance, I'll always reopen the problem for them. And you can either do this automatically or manually, but it's up to you. But yeah, you have all the flexibility to do that.
Great. And I know we're at time. We just had one more question I think that we can get to. There's some questions about the show your work feature.
Yes.
And how do you use that? And is it, what's your students' experience, and is it easy for them to use?
Sure. So I mentioned during the presentation that students can either type their work in directly or they can upload a file. I found that most students choose to do the uploading the file piece because it's just a little bit faster. So that comes in 2 versions. Either they write it down physically on a piece of paper and then they take a picture and upload the picture file. When I first told my students about that 5 or 6 years ago, I thought nobody's going to do that, but they loved it. You know, it's a generational thing. Sometimes they would include their faces in the shots, you know, selfies. They like doing that. They like being able to do the work on paper and then upload that just with a picture. Other students, and this was more in my upper level classes, would type their work into a Microsoft Word file, and then they would upload that file. So it depended on what the student was comfortable with, but it really applies to all levels. You can either just do it with a picture or you can type it in if you're savvy enough to use the equation editor.
And the last question about the Ask My Work is, when you're grading it, does it automatically grade it and then you have to go back and edit it, or how is the grading experience?
Yeah, so you can set this up a couple different ways. I set it up so that it automatically gives you the credit no matter what you type in. And then I go back and I grade it myself. And I make my students aware of that. I told them, look, you know, you're going to get credit no matter what. You could literally hit the space bar a couple times and submit that, and you're going to get full credit. But on Saturday, I'm going to go and check each one. And if you've just hit the space bar and you've left it blank, or you haven't shown the work, then I'm going to decrease those points. You can also set it up so that it doesn't award any credit, and then you as the instructor have to go in and award it. So it depends on how you want to do it, whether you want to start at 0 and build up, or start at full credit and knock it down. Either way is possible.
Great, thank you. So we're going to have to wrap it up. As I said, Willem will be at our office hours next if you want to join us there. But just to wrap this up with a bow, here again is Willem's information. If you did want to, let me actually share. If you did want to reach out to him, here's his email, and just give you a second to take a look at that. But also, we just also wanted to reiterate some of the links that we've been sharing throughout the WebAssign sessions. One, if you do need additional training, we do have a training site that you can visit for tutorial documentation as well as videos. If you're ever wondering if there's any issues with the platform, make sure that you check the Tech Check website. This is also great to share with your students in case they're ever having an issue in the middle of the night. Is it with their computer? Is it with WebAssign? You can immediately check to see if there's anything going on with WebAssign. And then lastly, for some how-tos and best practices, we have lots of online help. We recommend using the help button within WebAssign. It is one of the most useful and handy resources for WebAssign outside of contacting directly a faculty partner or a WebAssign expert. It has all of your questions answered there for you, step-by-step tutorials. That's what we want. And then lastly, we recommend that you bookmark our WebAssign blog, where you can find all of our best practices, tips, and directions on how to actually implement all of those tips in those articles. And also, if you ever have a question about any of the content for WebAssign, know that you have a direct line of communication to our content team. If you wonder, how was a question being graded? I disagree with it, or I don't think this is correct. Or if you need help writing or editing your own questions, just feel free to email our content team in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they're there to help you as well. So we definitely want to make sure that whatever level of support that you need going into this fall semester, you're going to get it from somebody. So lastly, if you could just help us complete this poll. I know we've been asking this. We're trying to gauge, how are each of these sessions helping you prepare for your fall semester? Because as I just stated, we just want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to make sure that you have the knowledge and resources to be successful however you end up teaching this fall.